There's a group of daring adventurers out there who have been taking on ghosties and ghoulies for us, protecting us from spectral nasties and making sure that every haunting has an explanation. Every ghost is exposed. Sorry, where was I? Oh yes, I'm speaking of course of the Scooby Gang. Neil Ross was born in London at Middlesex Hospital on the last day of the year in 1944, as he puts it in his memoir Vocal Recall, just in time to experience the V-2 rockets coming in from Germany. His mother was an English stage actress, and his father was a Canadian salesman who had wound up trapped in England by the start of the World War and had wound up being put in charge of managing an army base's theater. After the war ended, the Rosses would move across the ocean to Canada. At an early age, Neil showed a gift for spelling and grammar, as well as for mimicry. His family at the time had no television, but he had a record player and a handful of children's records, and he would spend hours trying to imitate the things he heard on the records and that he heard from radio dramas on the air to entertain himself. He recalls an instance in which his father brought home a reel-to-reel recorder, and Neil, excited to hear his vocal work for the first time, begged permission to act out the funny pages from the Montreal Star into the recorder, and he was pleased to hear that he was actually accomplishing the things with his voice that he thought he was. His first performance opportunity would come in grade school during a free art period in class. Neil Ross didn't care for drawing and he didn't care for painting, so he asked for and received permission to entertain his artistically inclined classmates during that time each day with readings from Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. This would lead to the young Ross emceeing a school assembly that was recorded for a Montreal radio station's program, Time for Youth. After a business trip to California, Neil's father announced that the family would be moving. He had enjoyed his time in the Golden State and decided he would much rather spend his winters there than in Canada. Neil was thrilled after their move to discover that several American stations at the time had started changing their formats to rock and roll and rhythm and blues. He had just discovered Little Richard on the radio back in Canada, and here in the U.S., he found entire radio programs and eventually entire stations dedicated to the same kind of music. As Ross grew up, he had trouble with his grades in school. His teachers complained that he was unmotivated, and his parents by and large treated Neil as though he had no helpful talents. When Neil announced to them one evening that he was going to become a radio DJ, he says that they informed him that radio was a lousy business filled with third-rate people, and that he probably wouldn't be able to get into it. But Ross would spend hours standing outside of a glass-walled radio studio in downtown San Diego, just watching the DJs work. But it was through his job as a paperboy that he wound up making his first connection in the radio industry. DJ Otto Miller lived on another paperboy's route, and Ross managed to wrangle an introduction to one of his radio heroes. Miller took him under his wing and showed him the basics of the industry, and gave his approval when Ross decided to take a 6-month course at the RCA Institutes in New York. In 1962, Ross wrapped up his 6-month course and headed back west looking for work. His first opportunity would come as the late afternoon DJ at a 250-watt radio station that was only allowed to operate during the daylight hours. but that work would lead to more stations in better markets, including KKUA in Honolulu, Hawaii, and KCBQ San Diego. He would eventually wind up on KMPC Los Angeles, where he would remain until the end of his radio career in 1985. But while working on radio in Los Angeles, he discovered voiceover work. His first role came in 1978 with a guest shot on Hanna-Barbera's Richie Rich. Ross would provide commercial voiceovers as well as working frequently on Saturday morning cartoons, and he would often be called in for work that required someone who could imitate a celebrity voice, such as playing John J. Rambo in 65 episodes of Rambo: The Force of Freedom, and performing in Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling as the voice of Mean Gene Okerlund. Today, Neil Ross lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Jeannie Jackson, and their daughter, and he continues to take on voiceover work.
Oh, you show up unannounced, do you? They don't teach you to give fair warning in the afterlife?
No, they do, which is why I'm here to give you this warning. You shall be visited by 3 ghosts!
Oh, so there's 3 more of you coming. Will they have the decency to let me know before they arrive?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, get on with it then.
1968 had the potential to be a hard time for Hanna-Barbera. Parent watchdog groups were up in arms over the violence in children's television, and they were aiming their ire squarely at all of the company's most popular cartoons: Space Ghost, The Herculoids, and Birdman. By 1969, every one of their action shows had been canceled in response to the protests. That was when Fred Silverman, executive for daytime programming at CBS, contacted the company. CBS had been revitalizing their Saturday morning line, and at the core of it was Filmation's The Archie Show. It was the perfect material to draw in kids, but mollify parent groups, as it featured non-violent stories combined with pop music numbers. Silverman wanted to repeat the success of The Archie Show and pitched to Joseph Barbera the idea of a teenage rock group who solved mysteries in between gigs. A combination of I Love a Mystery and The Archie Show was specifically what he had in mind. Barbera started work on an idea he called House of Mystery. He would turn the work he had done over to Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, who, working with designer Iwao Takamoto, would develop it into Mysteries 5, a gang of 5 teenagers with a bongo-playing dog who would solve supernatural mysteries. The bongo-playing dog, named Too Much, was made into a sheepdog because their original idea to use a Great Dane, they feared, would make the character too much like Marmaduke. Fred Silverman hated the idea, but was intrigued when he heard from Barbera that Too Much was originally supposed to be a Great Dane. He asked for another take on the series pitch. Takamoto would consult with a Great Dane breeder and would follow the advice he got from the dog expert by designing a character who was the exact opposite. Bowed legs instead of straight, a double chin, a sloped back. Too Much would be a terrible example of a Great Dane, and that would make him funny. Meanwhile, the teenage kids took on familiar forms and names, including Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy. The finished product was entitled Who's Scared? And while Silverman dug the changes, the brass at CBS hated it. They refused it outright. Silverman, suddenly finding himself without an anchor program for Saturdays, regrouped with the team at Hanna-Barbera and went through one more set of redesigns. They toned down the scariness of the show, did away with the rock band element, and decided to emphasize Shaggy and Too Much as the comic relief in order to keep the tone of the show light. One last idea thrown into the mix, legend has it, came when Silverman heard Frank Sinatra's recording of Strangers in the Night during a red-eye flight out to the development meetings. He walked in and declared that the dog, Too Much, was now to be called Scooby-Doo. The characters would debut in September of 1969 and would become the core of one of television's longest-running franchises. In 2014, a new series of Scooby-Doo was announced. This would be the 12th television series in the long-running franchise, hot on the heels of the recently canceled Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, a series that I have to admit I absolutely loved, and that featured the voice of Harlan Ellison playing freaking Harlan Ellison. Some fans of the franchise as a whole had taken poorly to Mystery Incorporated, though, because the series mixed the franchise's typical monster of the week turns out to be a person in a costume stories with stories that featured actual strange and paranormal occurrences. And Warner Brothers Animation, now in possession of all of Hanna-Barbera's intellectual property, worried that the series might have been too dark in tone to capture the younger audience that had always been the source of Scooby-Doo's success. The decision was made to pull Scooby-Doo back, restore the human behind the mask to the most prominent place in its stories, but also to brighten up and simplify the character designs and focus on comedy. Producer Zach Moncrief, an alumnus of Disney's Phineas and Ferb, refers to the style as simplistic, edgy, but denied that he was making a campy meta version of Scooby-Doo. Riotously funny and irreverent, the series launched on Cartoon Network. The series would be put on hiatus after 20 episodes, just 6 episodes before the end of its first season, and those last 6 episodes and the show's entire second season would run on Boomerang and Boomerang Video on Demand.
Ah! Help, quick!
What happened?
The ghost of Christmas past showed me how I let greed chase away my true love. I'm feeling something where I don't feel good about my choices.
Regret?
Yes, regret! Ah!
Neil Ross's Scrooge is an unrepentant jerk, just flat out unpleasant. Most of the earliest part of the story is skipped, but given that Scrooge employs a chef, it's worth assuming that he dines at home regularly. Marley pops in to make his dread pronouncement, and just Marley, no desperate spirits, seems awful suspicious, gang. And just like the stingiest man in town, Scrooge lives just above his counting house, which is lucky because when 4 cheeky American kids and their Great Dane come in looking to exchange their money for British pounds, they can pop right upstairs and get hired to find out what's going on. The Ghost of Christmas Present looks pretty traditional, but nope, no 2 children named Want and Ignorance gnawing at his ankles. And I'm going to give a point to falling into the grave, even though Scrooge doesn't do it himself, because Velma backs into the grave and plunges into the darkness. Wait, Velma drops into the grave? Yeah, it turns out it's hard to nail down Ross's Scrooge completely, because he actually spends most of the episode off-screen. Instead, the episode focuses on the character of Velma Dinkley, who we get to see being haunted by 3 spirits, past, present, and future, which means... Born in Jersey City, New Jersey, USA on March 31st, 1980, Kate Micucci would grow up in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. Her parents raised her as a Catholic, and she would learn classical piano from her mother starting when she was only 4 years old. She would graduate from Keystone College in La Plume, Pennsylvania, with an AA in Fine Arts, with an emphasis on making and painting puppets. She briefly moved to Hawaii, where she found work watering banana and pineapple plants, then moved to Los Angeles, where she attended Loyola Marymount University, graduating with a BA in Studio Arts in 2003. Originally, Micucci planned to pursue a career with puppets, but she began acting with commercial appearances, which can be tricky to track down. Most actors don't put their commercials on their resume, even when that's most of what they've done. But, YouTube exists. You're on there right now.
Want Lay's Stacks crisps with the real taste of Hidden Valley Ranch dressing?
Sandy, what are you doing?
I have a cool idea.
But she made her first appearance as a series guest star in 2006 on Malcolm in the Middle. In 2007, she was in the lobby of the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater during a Doug Benson show when she ran into Ricky Lindholm, a childhood friend from music camp who had, on her own, also made the decision to move to Los Angeles to pursue an entertainment career. They would begin writing comedy songs together and later that year began performing as Garfunkel and Oates after teaming up during the writers' strike to turn Lindholm's script Imaginary Larry into a musical. Lindholm posted a couple of videos of the duo playing live to YouTube for their friends and family to enjoy. But in 2009, one of those videos would suddenly go viral. With a sudden upsurge in their online fan base, the two created the Garfunkel and Oates Hour, playing monthly at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. Micucci would also appear on Scrubs as the ukulele-toting Stephanie Gooch and would play one of Garfunkel and Oates' viral songs, although edited for content. The duo would appear on The Jay Leno Show in December of 2009 and on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in 2010. Hey, remember when Jay Leno said he was leaving late night for an earlier time slot and that if it failed, it would just fail and he would go away? And then it failed, and he decided he wanted his old time slot back, and the network gave it to him, and Conan O'Brien was sent away in exile only to launch a popular TBS talk show. Good times. In 2011, Garfunkel and Oates released their debut studio album, and it was announced that they had signed to produce a pilot for HBO, which was looking for a replacement for the recently ended Flight of the Conchords, which had itself replaced the previous comedy music duo-based series Tenacious D. Their pilot would not be picked up for a full series, but HBO would release 5 shorts taken from the pilot to their streaming service. In 2012, they would be featured on Comedy Central's The Half Hour, and their second studio album would hit the top of Billboard's comedy chart. Micucci would continue picking up acting work both in commercials and guesting on television series the entire time. In 2013, Garfunkel and Oates would finally get their series when they were picked up as an IFC original with Fred Savage directing. The show would air from August to September of 2014, but would not be renewed for a second season. In 2015, in addition to Garfunkel and Oates releasing their third studio album, Micucci would join the core voice cast of Scooby-Doo as Velma Dinkley, starting with voicing Be Cool Scooby-Doo. She and Lindholm would be nominated for a Primetime Emmy for Outstanding Original Music and Lyrics for their 2016 comedy special, Trying to Be Special, and they would contribute to the soundtrack of Comedy Central's Another Period, in which Ricky Lindholm starred. Starting in 2017, Micucci voiced Webby Vanderquack in the rebooted DuckTales. Lindholm and Micucci would be contracted in 2019 to contribute a Tween Dream remix of the Lego movie's Everything is Awesome for its sequel, and the duo would wind up being hired by First Lady Michelle Obama to write music for her children's series on Netflix, Waffles and Mochi. The show debuted in 2021, featuring 7 original songs by Lindholm and Micucci. As of 2021, Micucci lives in Los Angeles with her spouse, record producer Jake Sinclair, and their son. She and Lindholm are, as of this recording, working on the music for an upcoming animated Netflix original entitled Steps.
1903? Why? What are you saying? Do you mean my friends are...
Over here, gang! Scooby-Doo!
I'm 455 dog years old.
We've already given out points for this show for the actual Ebenezer Scrooge, so let's just take a moment free from discussing what points need to be given to just talk a little bit about Velma's place in this story. As any fan of Scooby-Doo knows, Velma Dinkley is the steadfast and resolute skeptic of the group. No matter who else in the group may waver, Velma is always 100% certain that they're still chasing a guy in a mask, maybe with a hologram projector. On the rare occasion that she does start to suspect a supernatural explanation, you know that it has truly gone sideways.
Like, where are your glasses?
I don't need them. I see everything clearly now. Yes, everything.
I think Velma just had her first real ghost encounter.
I think she's still having it.
So as the teen begins to investigate the haunting of Ebenezer Scrooge, it's Velma who gets targeted by the three spirits in an attempt to derail her investigation. They show her scenes from her past and present, as well as trying to show her her future in an effort to convince Velma that she has wasted her true potential as an inventive genius by following around 3 dips and a dog in a van. Or rather, a carriage. This is still Victorian England. But it's up to Velma to realize that exposing the truth is not a waste of time. It has real value, and it does make the world a better place. Although sometimes you can be just a little too smart for your own good.
Wonderful work, kids. You've doomed us all.
So tell me, what do you think of Neil Ross as actual Ebenezer Scrooge and Kate Micucci as Velma Dinkley in The Office of Ebenezer Scrooge in Season 2, Episode 10 of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, Scroogey-Doo? That's what the comments are for. Drop on down there and let me know. While you're down there, make certain that you click like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make certain that you hit the bell so that you can be notified whenever there are new videos available. There's also a share button that you can use because sharing is caring. If you are super eager to see some more Film Optimist, then you can look right there where you'll see the beginning of the Advent Calendar of Scrooges, or up here, there is my Halloween countdown of Draculas. Until next time, watch like it means something.